well know. So Neville Ketchup Chamberlain goes to the Middle East and says we've got to do something, but he doesn't know what it is. The answer is for Egypt to unleash its army onto Gaza and in a pincer movement go into Gaza City and crush the Hamas rocket factories, and that'll be the end of it. Blow up the tunnels, crush the rocket factories, and then maybe there could be peace. That's the only solution. So the world is a mess right now because we have a vacuum coming out of the White House, and as you well know, nature abhors a vacuum. One of the primary rules of physics is that nature abhors a vacuum. America was once the citadel for liberty around the world. It's now become nothing, an empty shell, because we have an empty individual in the White House. And so we see a war brewing in the Middle East. We see people dying for no reason over the Ukraine. Over Ukraine. We see people dying here, dying there. We see a government out of control, a rogue government stepping on the people. We see a rogue government in New York State, a rogue government in California, making laws up as they wish. And then we wake up and we read the filmmaker that we've all maybe liked or laughed with, Woody Allen, gives a speech that life is meaningless, it's all going to end. What does it really mean? So all of the great works of art will go with the earth as the sun burns out. And so therefore, what's the meaning of existence? So this is what happens when you're 78 and you've believed only in yourself all your life, and you realize that when you die, the world dies. You think that the world dies with you. Now, he's a filmmaker and a fine artist. I don't particularly like his message. I think he's very funny. But the point is he triggered a thought in my head. How do you find meaning in life? In all of this confusion in the world, what do you do for meaning? I'm talking to you, sir. You, lady, you stepping into your Lexus somewhere in New Jersey. How do you find meaning in your life? Juggling family, bags of groceries, whatever. A husband you don't particularly care for anymore. How do you justify all of this? How do you fill this void? What do you believe in? What if you're this family? Here's a story just came out from in my backyard, Half Moon Bay. A young man, 26 years old, digs a hole on a Northern California beach. The hole collapses and he gets trapped in the sand for 5 minutes and dies. He's on vacation. He dug a 10-foot deep hole at a state beach, standing in it around 5:30 last night when the sand started caving in around him. Right? He was on a campground, just on vacation. Well, all of a sudden, 30 people, including the man's friends, bystanders, frantically dug with their hands, buckets, and other improvised tools to expose his head. Right? They were able to free his head in 5 minutes just as firefighters arrived at the scene. When they got there, he was dead. That's all. 5 minutes, you're dead. So what do you do in a case like that? God punished him for what? He did something wrong? What did he do wrong? He did something wrong, so God said, go dig a hole in the sand and you'll be buried alive. That's all. It's reincarnation. He was buried alive because he did something in the last life. How do you make sense of these things? So let me take you back in time. Let me take you back to a time before there was life on Earth. Let's go back to a world in space and a world in time. And let's go back to the story of our world history. Right? What was there? Well, we don't know what was there. It was nothing. There was nothing, apparently. It was a world floating around an entity in space and time. And then life began, we don't know how. Then we had the age of fishes, the age of the coal swamps. And then came the age of reptiles, the first birds and the first mammals. Then the age of mammals appeared. Then there came monkeys, apes, and submen. Then Neanderthal, the Rhodesian man. The first true men came, and then there came primitive thought. Then cultivation began, and they were no longer hunters and gatherers. They were cultivating crops. And then we saw primitive Neolithic civilizations. Then we looked at early Egypt, Sumeria. Then we saw primitive nomadic peoples. Then we saw the first seagoing peoples. And then we saw the primitive Aryans. Then we see the last Babylonian Empire and the empire of Darius I. And then we come to the early history of the Jews. The priests and prophets in Judea. And that's the point at which we're going to talk about right now, because this is a very important departure point, the early history of the Jews, the Hebrews, a Semitic people who were not very important in their own time, but extremely important in the world's history, in later history of the world. Not very important in their time. They were settled in Judea long before 1000 BC, and their capital